So the Supreme Court just held oral arguments in the next landmark Second Amendment case. So let's talk about what just happened before the Supreme Court. But real quick before we jump into the video, if you think it's time for the Supreme Court to strike down more gun control laws, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is Blackout Coffee. Blackout Coffee has amazing coffee and they are huge Second Amendment supporters. They have dedicated roasts for organizations like FBC and GOA, so if you want to get amazing coffee and support the 2A cause, check them out using the links down below. And if you use the code ARMSCHOLAR, you can get 10% off of your order. So like I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be breaking down the recent oral arguments that happened before the Supreme Court this morning in the U.S. v. Rahimi case. This case is critical and it's going to be the next Second Amendment landmark case that the Supreme Court issues, and it involves a lot of different topics. It has huge implications going forward for a lot of other cases. And again, if you're not familiar with what this case was, this is the U.S. v. Rahimi case, and it deals primarily with the question of who are the people, as mentioned in the text of the Second Amendment, who are the dangerous people who maybe fall outside the class of the people protected by the Second Amendment. And that's kind of one of the main ways the government here is trying to position this case, and they're trying to get a decision by the Supreme Court on some of those issues. But there were some other things that happened that we need to cover in this oral argument because it was very interesting. And I think there's going to be some very telling things going forward with the whole Second Amendment context. Now, this case arose out of a recent Fifth Circuit decision where the Fifth Circuit recently ruled that the federal law, which prohibits gun possession of people subject to domestic violence restraining orders, is in fact unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. And the Fifth Circuit issued that critical decision using the Bruen decision, and the three-judge panel there analyzed 18 U.S.C. section 922 G8 under that Supreme Court 6-3 decision in Bruen and ultimately struck it down. Now, for those not familiar with this case, I do want to state from the outset that the facts were not super great for the 2A cause. In fact, because Mr. Rahimi was involved in various other incidents, which make him very clearly to be a bad person. And a lot of those facts, I think, kind of bit the representative for Mr. Rahimi kind of in the butt when he was trying to argue before the Supreme Court, and kind of tied him up in some of the arguments, and some of the things kind of veered off course. And at some points, I also think that he kind of confused the Supreme Court justices, and multiple times the Supreme Court justices actually reflected that. Now, we're going to kind of talk about what happened in the oral arguments just a little bit later, but I want to give some of you the context about what happened in this specific case and how this got before the Supreme Court. So between December of 2020 and January 2021, Mr. Rahimi was involved in 5 different shootings in the Arlington, Texas area. Now, because of those multiple incidents, Mr. Rahimi was identified as a potential suspect. The police department in the area got a warrant to search his home. They searched his home, and in his bedroom, they found both a pistol and a rifle. And they made contact with Mr. Rahimi after the fact, and he admitted that yes, those were his firearms. And then they became aware of the fact that he was also subject to a domestic violence restraining order and a restriction on him possessing firearms. And then ultimately, because of the combination of all that, he was indicted of possessing a firearm in violation of his domestic violence restraining order, and that also violated 18 U.S.C. section 922 G8. Now, early in his case, he brought a challenge to that section of federal law. He challenged it as unconstitutional, but because of some Fifth Circuit precedent, he wasn't allowed to bring that type of challenge. It was kind of foreclosed. But then the Supreme Court issued that 6-3 decision in Bruen, and they reaffirmed that text as informed by relevant history and tradition is the true analysis. And so the Fifth Circuit reopened the case, reanalyzed the case, and ultimately, under the Bruen analysis, found that this section of federal law is unconstitutional, and they struck it down. Now, of course, the Department of Justice and the government could not let that type of decision sit, so they sought Supreme Court review. Now, I'll probably do a more comprehensive breakdown after I listen to the oral arguments maybe 2 or 3 more times, but this is kind of my initial response and some of the main things that popped up to me during the oral arguments. So first and foremost, just the general demeanor of the parties. I think the DOJ's attorney did a great job. I think she was very focused. The government's attorney was very focused on the things that she wanted to hit on. And we'll talk about some of those main things. And then the general takeaway is the representative, the attorney for Mr. Rahimi, really struggled because of the facts of his client. Now, first I want to focus on some of the arguments that the DOJ's attorney made, because I think that was one of the clearer sections. One of the main things that they tried to position was a test or category revolving around who are the law-abiding responsible people. Now, what was interesting here, and Thomas and some of the other judges pushed back against this, was that the DOJ's attorney was trying to represent that this really didn't deal with who is a law-abiding person, that this case Rahimi didn't deal with the law-abiding aspect of the test. And again, they tried to refute that it was a test. She tried to say that this is simply a category of people. But she stated that this didn't deal with law-abiding because Mr. Rahimi obviously was not convicted of anything specific. There was no misdemeanor conviction or a felony conviction. It was more of this civil protective order, this civil process. And really what it boiled down to and what she was arguing is because he was not a responsible person, therefore the government could restrict his access to firearms. Now, I will say on this specific portion of the arguments, the DOJ's attorney got a lot of pushback from multiple judges, from Gorsuch, Thomas, and others, about really this whole responsible person test, who is responsible, really truly is just a dangerousness test. So I suspect that when we get the decision from the court, they will focus more on the dangerousness aspect of who is too dangerous to possess firearms. And I think that's probably how this is going to be narrowly tailored in that specific decision by the Supreme Court, because there was a lot of pushback on that aspect of the arguments. Now, I will say one of the big things that the DOJ focused on was trying to change the actual Bruen analysis. They tried to move away from the text, history, and tradition standard to try to broaden the test, to try to broaden the analysis, to open the door to what type of historical support could be put in place or presented to justify these types of government restrictions and really meet their broad standard of who is, deemed not responsible, not a reasonable, responsible citizen. So they were trying to broaden the Bruen test. And I think that's probably one of the main goals of what the government wants out of this Rahimi case, is to broaden the Bruen analysis to help them not only in this case, but other cases down the road. Now I want to shift a little bit to the arguments that was made by Mr. Rahimi's representatives. And to be honest, they were all over the place, and it was even hard for me to follow some of the main points that they were trying to make. Again, the justice pushed back quite frequently on some of the arguments that Mr. Rahimi's representative was making. And I think the bad facts of Mr. Rahimi really kind of tied the hands of his representative and made it really a hard day. I really felt for the guy. It was a hard day for him in court for sure. Now, if you want my general takeaway about maybe how this is going to play out, I would say that this is probably going to be a majority opinion for a reversal of the Fifth Circuit decision, especially of their facial striking down of this section of federal law. And I also, again, want to focus on the fact that they're reviewing this as a facial challenge. Justice Gorsuch specifically was, I believe, trying to focus some of his questions on maybe still leaving the door open for, even if they issue a decision which reverses what the Fifth Circuit says, they're going to reverse it, saying that just outright striking down this federal law was not valid, but they are going to probably leave the door open for future as-applied challenges. If someone is clearly not a dangerous person and they are subject to some sort of restriction on their ability to possess firearms, then they're still going to be able to bring as-applied challenges to this, section of federal law and potentially other sections of federal law, saying, as this applies to me specifically, this is unconstitutional. So I think they're going to still leave that door open, which would still be a positive step in the right direction because, prior to Bruen, we could never make those types of claims. So it's still going to be a net positive win, but I do think that they're going to reverse what the Fifth Circuit said, just outright striking down this section of federal law under Bruen. And then also, which was interesting, and I think could impact what happens in this case, is multiple times, multiple justices like Barrett, Gorsuch, and others reference another case which is currently seeking Supreme Court review, which is the Bryan Range case, the Range v. Garland case that we've talked about. And that has better facts for us. And we talked all along that that's going to be probably a better case for Supreme Court review because that deals with a different section of the similar federal law, but it deals with non-violent felons losing their right to keep and bear arms in self-defense, even within their home, just an outright ban. And that specific case dealt with food stamps and lying on a food stamp form. And obviously the Supreme Court was very aware of the facts of that case, very aware that that case is pending in front of them. So I think that likely means that the Supreme Court is very interested in also taking up that case. And I hope they take up that case and we get some sort of narrow ruling in this Rahimi case. And then, some of the other issues that are more important, hopefully they're addressed in the Range case. Again, just a quick overview of what happened today in the U.S. v. Rahimi oral arguments. I'm going to do some follow-up questions and some follow-up videos down the road. But if you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I'll try to answer the best of my ability. Also, if you like this video and you'd like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. Also want to mention that you might want to double check your subscription because a lot of people get unsubscribed from the channel and without you knowing, so just double check that. And then also, if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing to the channel, support the 2A cause, grow the 2A community here on YouTube, and help to get this information to more people. So of course, always share these videos, share it to more people if you think they need this type of information. So as always, thank you guys so much for all of your support, and never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.